multi-talented, multi-hyphenate with multiple incomes. Today I'm very excited to talk to Ariana Dunne about her career and her businesses. I've known Ariana for a few years from her previous career before we both reinvented ourselves. She's a real multi-hyphenate. She's a career coach, she's a celebrant, she's a trainer and much more. She has multiple skills and multiple revenues. So whether you work for yourself or work for somebody else and you want to pay a rise, you have to check this one out on selfmakers.com/show. Enjoy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to the Selfmakers Show. This is your host, ConorLyn.ch. Hi Ariana, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks Connor. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good.
Good to see you.
You too. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. You too. So we've met a few times recently, just to catching up on your new career, because I know you in one of your previous careers. So do you want to tell us about your background and maybe how we met in the past and what you're up to, how your career has traversed since then?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started out as a journalist. I qualified with a BA in international journalism, and I worked for a couple of years through college as a freelance journalist. And I basically then kind of sold my soul to the devil after a bit of travel. I came back to Ireland and I got offered a job as a staff writer for a magazine. And in the same week, I got offered a job with the Daily Mail as supplements and features manager, which was a completely new department. It was something that they wanted me to create as a 24-year-old upstart. It was a big opportunity to work for such a big company, obviously the biggest publishing company in the world at the time, the Daily Mail. So I sort of sold my soul to the devil and went down the advertising route as opposed to the writing. I was working in the marketing and sales department. So my job was to kind of come up with ideas for supplements and features and sell them to advertisers, and also come up with the idea for all of the editorial. So it was kind of a combining of my skills, my sales skills, and also my writing skills. So I would be creating anything from travel supplements to parenting supplements to women in business supplements, but effectively I was selling nothing because the things didn't exist at the time. So I had to just get people to trust me very early on. So it was an amazing introduction into the world of sales and advertising. And 2 years into that job, I launched You magazine into the Irish market. So again, an amazing opportunity. I was given a huge amount of trust and faith by my CEO at the time in the Daily Mail. So made a lot of contacts, and after about 4.5 years working there, I decided to move to London, where I worked for Bauer Media, again another huge publishing company, and I was a creative solutions manager working on the men's entertainment titles, so brands like FHM, Zoo, Empire, Q, Kerrang, and Mojo. So it was a really exciting 2 years, mostly involving drinking at my desk and taking clients out for entertainment purposes, FHM parties and Empire awards and things like that. But again, it was a very exciting time working on £1 million campaigns for the likes of O2 and Puma and Capital One. So yeah, from there I went and worked for the Spectator, Boris Johnson's old magazine, who he used to edit. So that was an interesting time with Andrew Neil as my chairman. Worked as head of digital there. Then was in Dennis Publishing in the UK for a year before coming back to Ireland, where I got the job as head of digital for Maximum, or head of sales, should I say, for Maximum Media, which is Joe.ie, her.ie, Sports Joe and her family. So the biggest digital publishing company in Ireland at the time. Worked there for a year, suffered some burnout, which I'll explain later, which was kind of like a pivot in my career. And after taking some time out, I then went as CCO, which was my last role with Sheology, so Shamazing and Mummy Pages. So I was a chief commercial officer there before deciding to go out on my own. So 2.5 years ago, I decided to start working for myself, which is what I'm doing now.
What did you decide to do?
Yeah, so basically, I suppose to talk about the burnout period, after working in Maximum Media, which was a phenomenal company, huge brands, I joined the company at a significant period of growth for the company. We doubled our sales team, doubled doubled the company. We launched over in the UK. We doubled the revenue. I was the head of sales. We were working on about 30-40 briefs per week, which is a phenomenal amount of briefs for any team to be working on. And we were also retaining about 75% of that business. So it was a very, very exciting time, but as you can imagine, extremely busy and stressful time as well, as someone who's responsible for that amount of revenue. And I was very passionate about making sure that my clients got what they asked for, and the clients were happy. I had very close relationships with a lot of the clients, so it took a toll on me. I was working 12-13-hour days. I basically was just really, really stressed. I wasn't seeing my friends, wasn't seeing my family, didn't really like who I was. I was a tough boss, I was a person who was kind of always looking for the next win. So unfortunately I suffered some burnout, and I decided, enough was enough, and went, interestingly enough, Blind Boy from the Rubber Bandits was hosting a mental health talk for Joe.ie. And I was in the audience, and I remember him saying, if anyone out there is passionate about something and they're not doing what they want to do, or if anyone feels like they have something that they want to be doing other than what they're doing, they should just go and do it. And I remember it was like a light bulb moment for me at that moment. It was like the room went dark and a spotlight shone on me. And the next day I quit my job, and I actually decided to go to the south of France. I booked myself into a writers and artists retreat, and tried to reinvigorate my love of writing, which is what I had sort of given up all those years before. So I went to a writers retreat for 3.5 months to write a book. And I'm still writing. But it was an amazing experience. And during that time, I kind of, met a lot of incredible people from around the world. And I really sort of thought about what I wanted my future to be. And one of the things that always kept coming back, and it kind of kept happening when I was in this retreat as well, was that people would be coming to me looking for advice all the time. And people were interested in my opinion on what I had to say. And that had happened throughout my career. So I kind of into the idea of coaching and mentoring. And using my skills and bringing that forward into my career. So after France, I went to LA, had 6 months out in total, came back to Ireland, took the job with Sheology, but I was very clear with them that I was going to work from 9 to 5, I wasn't going to suffer burnout, and that I had a kind of a 2-year plan. And my plan was to retrain. So I retrained as a life coach and a business coach with Mindstream life coaching training. And then I also retrained as a celebrant to perform weddings and baby naming ceremonies, which again is just something that I'm quite passionate about. During that time, I was also really fortunate in those 2 years to buy an apartment, because I knew that, working for yourself, it's always harder to get a mortgage and things like that. So I kind of set myself up, sort of put all my ducks in a row, and I side hustled for a while. So for about 9 months, once I graduated as a coach, I started building my coaching business. And, I kind of knew that I wouldn't be able to just leave my well-paid job and having gotten a mortgage, quit my job for putting all my eggs in one basket. So I looked at multiple opportunities, and I'm now a multi-hyphenate, as the new terminology is. And I have about 11 different sources of income, doing lots of different things that I really enjoy.
That's amazing. That truly is amazing. So, when we met, you were really focused on the one thing, and you were excellent at it. We collaborated over some Huawei events, the Snappies.
Snappies, yeah, that's right. When I was in Joe and Her, exactly.
Yeah, that was great. So you've still have all those skills, and then you've added loads more skills, and that's really, really amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the other things that I do is I lecture. So I teach now with the Fitzwilliam Institute. I teach on the digital marketing course, the PR and events course, the data analytics course. And with those courses, I teach digital media, but I also teach people how to prep for interview, work placement, CV creation, all of those kinds of things. So I do that with the Fitzwilliam Institute, but I also teach with the Digital Marketing Academy of Ireland, because obviously I've worked in digital media and advertising, worked across every brand imaginable, I suppose, throughout my 16-year career working in advertising and sales. So I now teach students, teach small business owners how to market themselves and how to promote their brands using digital media. And I also sort of came full circle. I now teach coaching with Mindstream, where I trained as a coach 3 years ago. So I teach coaching with that skill. Now, it started off with me going in and just teaching digital media, but now I'm teaching the whole course. So it's amazing how when you start working for yourself, these opportunities kind of find you, I suppose. I've been very fortunate in that way, but a lot of people kind of are worried about going out and working for themselves and having to really kind of graft. But I think once you make the decision and you leave yourself open to opportunities, opportunities can come your way.
It's great. So it sounds a bit like myself. It's a very meandering, interesting career journey, working for other people, then side hustling, and then going on your own, and then now you've multiple revenue streams. So what do you, for you, when you're advising people on their careers, how do you use all your experience to try and help them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of empathizing that I can do with people, because I've kind of, I'm only 38, so I wouldn't say I've seen it all, but I've worked across a lot of brands. I know a lot of companies. I know how a lot of companies operate, how a lot of companies work. And I think, when I do a lot of private coaching now. I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of private clients who come to me, and I get referred quite a bit as well, which is great. And people come to me when they're like at a crossroads. That's how I sort of advertise myself. If you find yourself at a crossroads or looking to pivot within your life, that's the area I can help you with, because I've done it myself. So really it's just about helping people to uncover their passions, helping people to uncover their motivations. I'm very conscious that I'm single and I don't have any children, so I had the freedom to sort of pack in my job and leave things to chance and to opportunities and all of that kind of stuff, whereas some people have responsibilities and have people that are relying on them. So it's about looking at the idea, if they want to go and work for themselves, really, what is the idea that they have? What is their support network that they have behind them? How financially stable are they? I often do a wheel of life exercise with people that looks at the 8 different parts of a person's life, from personal relationships to money to health to personal physical environment, all those different things, to make an assessment of where someone is in their life before they kind of make any of those kind of decisions. And in terms of people who want to work for themselves, it's really about any training that they might need, any skills that they might need, and looking at the supports that are available to them. But if people are looking to kind of work in the workplace, or to work in a more traditional role, I help people with their CVs. I help people with cover letters, with prepping for interviews, all of those kinds of things, because I have my own recruitment company as well, so that's another string to my bow. I have a recruitment company called Mentor HR, which I launched 2 years ago, that specializes within the kind of the media industry. I worked in recruitment years ago, and I did some diplomas in manpower management, and so I kind of knew about that area, and I knew there was a little bit of a gap for the media industry in terms of headhunting and kind of finding people for very specific roles. So that's something that I have expertise in as well.
Great. And do you find that, say, from your start of your career to now, careers have become there's much more fragmented, and there's a lot more opportunities? There's almost too many opportunities? Or how do you see careers having changed over the last decade or so?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, were very concerned when people moved around on their CV, if they were like chopping and changing. And, I know that sort of commitment and loyalty is important, but at the same time, the world is changing so fast. Technology is changing so fast. I definitely encourage people to zigzag up their career ladder and try to get as much experience as possible. I think, in Ireland, we have so many big tech companies between Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon. I think the average time spent in each company is about 18 months. People tend to move around within that industry as well. And I think that's important. I think it's important for for people to get as much experience and as much diverse experience on their CV as possible. Because, you know, I know IBM were kind of quoted as saying that in 2030, 50% of the world's jobs don't even exist now, something crazy like that, you know, that there's some kind of idea. And I mean, it's so true. Like my brother is the global channel manager for Facebook for a Forex company in Cyprus. I mean, you know, that sentence wouldn't have made any sense 15 years ago. You know, no one would have known what it was. So, you know, I think industry is massively changing. Of course, the pandemic has had a massive effect on how we work and how our ways of working, and I think working from home will give people a lot more time to look at side hustles and look at different things that they want to do. I think innovation has been so huge in this country and in every country really over the last 9 months, where we've seen people kind of come up with ideas and pivot. And I think, you know, a lot of the companies that you see now probably didn't exist 9 months ago, you know. So I remember years ago being in an interview and somebody saying to me, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I just thought it was the most ridiculous question, because, you know, I said we could be like Minority Report. We could be plucking magazines out of the walls and, you know, having ads going into our eyeballs. You know, we've no idea what the future holds for us. So I think it's about continually upskilling, keeping ahead of what's happening, listening to what's going on around you, and, you know, just, you know, be ready for change, I think, is the most important thing.
Great. And obviously you're retraining quite, you have changed your focus quite a bit. So are you always learning and self-studying, and what's your view on how people can keep or learn new skills?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, I'm very fortunate in the sense that I'm teaching now. So as I'm teaching, I'm learning, if you know what I mean. So that's really, really quite good, because there's always new developments happening from a teaching perspective that I need to keep abreast of to make sure that I'm keeping my students up to date with what's going on. In terms of, you know, there's so much information out there. As I often say to people who are launching their own businesses who I work with, that there's never been a better or easier time for people to launch a business. You know, I mean, I remember 20 years ago creating websites using HTML code and going code by code, line by line, and now, you know, anyone can create a website, anyone can create social media. You know, Google has made everything so much easier for people to do their own thing. So, you know, we don't need to be reading encyclopedic books on how to launch businesses. You know, it's very, very easy now to do that. In terms of like self-learning, I think, you know, one of the things that I found interesting, listening to some of the other podcasts that you created, you know, you asked the question, what podcasts do you listen to? I don't really listen to podcasts, and you know, it's something that I do want to do more of, but I've always been a curious thinker, and I've always been a thinker, you know, someone who's creative. And I find that generally the time when maybe I should be or could be listening to podcasts, I use as my thinking time, you know. So I have a little dog now, and we go for walks, and I love sort of listening to the birds and, you know, kind of like just thinking and not having a distraction. And I think the world is so full of distractions now, that I think it's important that we allow some time for ourselves to just think. But one of the recommendations that I do have is I recently started using Blinkist. Which is an app, obviously, that condenses everything down into 15-minute formats. And yeah, it's fantastic. So there's been a lot of business books and coaching books and sort of self-development books that I've been wanting to read, but just never really getting the time to. So what this has been good at is it's been able to listen to these 15-minute, you know, summations of these books and getting the best nuggets of information from them. And it's been really, really interesting and really helpful. But I think what it's reiterated for me is that every self-book has the same points are made throughout every single one, just rephrased in a different way, you know. So yeah, it's that's been something interesting to come from that.
Yeah, I use it as well, so I would highly recommend it. It's a great app. There's another one as well. It's on YouTube. There's a guy who does the productivity game, and so he's got a series of he does about a 10-minute video about a book or about a concept, and then has a 1-page PDF summary of that. And it's done in an animation type style. So you really get a visual, which I like, the visual representation of the book in a 1-page PDF plus the video summary. And it's all about condensed learning. How can you learn as much as you can, as fast as you can? Because that's, again, to save time so you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, they're really helpful. And I think what I've seen from Blinkist as well is often when you read a book, you might turn to a friend and say, oh my God, I'm reading this book and there was something really interesting in it. And you will relay that 1 or 2 interesting pieces of information, and you forgot everything else, but those are the 2 things that stick out in your mind. And I found that that's what happens with Blinkist. They really just give you those nuggets. And, because I read one of the other books that I read recently is I was at a Bob Proctor seminar a while ago, and if anyone's familiar with Bob Proctor, would know that he talks all the time about Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich book. So I read that, actually read the book and then listened to it on Blinkist, and actually there was no difference. It was just much quicker to listen to it on Blinkist. Everything was the same. But what I find really interesting about that book is, having listened to some of the other podcasts we mentioned, Anthony Quigley, the digital marketing, there was a few different things that he said that were similar to what is said in Napoleon Hill's book, and I think with anyone who is successful, those Napoleon Hill nuggets of information, surrounding yourself with good people, hiring people to do the work that you can't do, expanding your network, having a good idea, all of those things still apply. And that book was written in around the 1920s. So it's really quite interesting to read that now, because it was just after the Spanish flu. So they talk about the new world and the new opportunities, which means, when you're reading it, you kind of feel like, what, was it written today? Because it's the same kind of concepts. It's just so interesting how history repeats itself and things are so cyclical that, but yeah, I recommend reading anything that was written around that time, because I think there's a lot of nuggets of information around after the Spanish flu into the Roaring 20s, which will apply to us today.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
Great. But you make starting a business and getting up and running sound so easy, but clearly it's not. Where do you think that people fall down? Because obviously it's not that easy.
I have to say, for me, it has been. No, do you know what it is? I remember last year doing this big deal, and I remember driving home, and I was so happy. I was so proud of myself, and I was so excited. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm so lucky, that this has happened. And then actually something struck with me, and I said, no, you know what, it's not luck. It's 16 years of hard work and graft, and it's 16 years of getting out there, expanding my network, making the contacts, building on my experience, and using all of that and bringing it forward. I think a lot of people sometimes when they start their own business, they kind of feel like that they could close a chapter on everything that went on before, and consider that this is sort of starting from the ground up, whereas it really doesn't have to be. I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of your network, of your contacts, of tapping into any opportunity that might come along. Being vocal about what it is that you're doing. I know personally for me, there was trepidation when I first started about announcing myself as my own business on LinkedIn, because I was worried about every negative person that I'd ever worked with sort of saying something negatively about me. But I've never had anything negative. I've had nothing but positivity and encouragement from people. So I think preventing yourself, stopping yourself from doing something because you're worried about the judgment of others is number one. I always say to people to get out of their own way. So you might be someone who doesn't engage with social media. You might think Facebook is stupid and Instagram is for influencer idiots. That's fine, but if it's not going to serve the purpose of your business, then you need to get out of your own way and get on board with creating your social media accounts. And often people will say to me, oh, LinkedIn doesn't work for me. I've never received any business from LinkedIn. But then I'll say to them, well, do you have many contacts? So like, no. Like, do you engage with LinkedIn? Well, no. Do you put any posts up on LinkedIn? Well, no. And it's like, well, how is it going to bring you any business? People seem to think that it happens just by magic. You really do have to engage and put posts up and talk to people about what it is that you're doing. There's very much the Irish notion of notions, of people being embarrassed about self-promotion and about talking about what it is that they're doing, and I think that's why a lot of early businesses kind of fail, is that people are so nervous about kind of putting themselves out there and putting their ideas out there, and I think that's just something people need to get better at.
Yeah, so clearly your sales gun, that's a brilliant skill to have. It's essential. It's one of the key success factors I've outlined in self makers. But is there other skills that things that people go wrong on that they need to have? Do you think if you don't have this, you're going to struggle?
I mean, I think the basic fundamentals of being in business, like confidence and all of those things that I kind of mentioned in terms of putting yourself out there, are really, really important. But obviously, when you look at the structure of a business in terms of accountancy and tax and setting things up in terms of licensing or accreditation, all of those kinds of things are really kind of important about establishing yourself kind of early on. I'm fortunate, one of my best friends is a tax partner in a tax firm, so she's been really helpful for me. But I think that's that is the other thing. It's about looking at your network and seeing even just in your friends and family, like someone might be an accountant somewhere, someone might be a bookkeeper, someone might be a solicitor, looking at your old school friends, friends that you were friends in school. That's something I've done recently, and I kind of looked up people and I've realized, oh my gosh, this person, he works in AIB and she works here, and there's people that you can kind of tap into. And also, barter, I think, is something that's interesting as well, and something that we don't really do too often. But if you have skills that you could potentially barter with somebody else, especially if you're starting off and money might be tight in terms of how you plan on spending things in terms of growing your business. I've spent very little on my business because I've used a lot of people in my network, and I have offered my skills to them in return for their skills back. So I think that's definitely something people could do.
That's great. Brilliant idea. Bit of a skill swap.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But I know when we talked previously, you mentioned one of your clients that was setting up a business, but previously had set up a business and kind of didn't realize the amount of different things that you need to consider, like marketing and finance and PR and all the rest, and that the first business ultimately didn't work out because of this. So is there many people like that just kind of that aren't quite aware? I'm trying to help them with self-makers, but is there people that need some help with realizing it's a big jump to go out on your own, obviously?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who go out on their own think that they have to be on their own. And I think, that's a really important acknowledgement to know that, you can't be good at everything, and you can't enjoy everything either. With that particular client of mine that you mentioned, she had a really great idea. She got really great support from Enterprise Ireland. She got recognized in the media. But really what she kind of ultimately realized was that she had a really good idea and liked the ideation part and sort of liked the concept part, but when it actually went to taking that product to market, the logistics, buying things in from China, dealing with retailers, dealing with pricing, dealing with the legalities, the bureaucracy, all of those kinds of things, she just really did not enjoy. And when you don't enjoy something like that, it becomes a burden and it becomes extremely cumbersome, and it takes away any potential success that you might be able to have in that business, because there's just so much that goes into it. I think for me, and then with my experience, being a multi-hyphenate has been really interesting, because I'm not putting all of my eggs into one basket. I think I probably wouldn't have been as successful as I have been over the last 2 years if I had been putting all my eggs in one basket, because there's so much stress and pressure that gets attached to that, especially when you're working for yourself. If you're working in one job, and you're getting paid and you're on a PAYE and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. You can focus on that. But when you're having all your eggs in one basket, if it fails, or if there's something that you're not interested in, it's very hard to climb back from that. Whereas with me having so many different things, if during the pandemic now, my recruitment business sort of really went out the window. I specialized in the media industry. There was nobody recruiting in that area, but because I had income coming in from other sources, that wasn't too scary for me, and it allows yourself to open up other opportunities as well. So I think, I think in terms of advice to people who are starting their own business, don't put all your eggs into one basket. Make sure that you have other opportunities, things to fall back on, and making sure that you have. One of the things that I often say to my clients is, what is enough and what is too much, So one of the things for me when I started working for myself was ask myself the question, how much money do I need to earn to live? How much money do I need to earn to pay my mortgage, pay my bills, and to put food on the table? And once I figured out how much that money was, which really wasn't a lot, really when you think about it, all I had to do was figure out how to get that money. And once I could figure out how to get that money, it was then, how do I get a little bit more so I can go on a holiday or whatever? And then once it's more, how do I get a little bit more so I can put some money into the bank, right? A lot of people when they're starting out, and I think this is a big issue, people want to have all the business, they want to start an agency and they want to get all the PR clients, or they rather than just thinking about the first one, and then the first 5, and then the first 10, rather than just thinking about, I have some coaching clients who'll come to me and they'll think about working for themselves, but then but then I'll have to spend all this money on advertising, and I'll have to this and have to that. And I say, well, look, what about if you got 3 clients? If you got 3 clients all paying you a $5,000 retainer per month, that's 15 grand per month. Is that possible? Is that feasible? And then they go, well, yeah, it is actually, but people tend to think really, really big first, instead of just thinking about the smaller pieces of the pie.
Which is very interesting. I also think that people, it's not just all about, say, when you set up your own business, but I think people need to be more, run their career like a business. So do you, any advice for people that are like, they don't want to set up anything on their own, but they want to improve their career and move up the ladder, whether it's one company or a different company, etc., how they can be more successful and maybe entrepreneurial within jobs?
I mean, one of the reasons why I became a coach was because, in very early on in my career, when I worked in the Daily Mail, I got headhunted about 18 months into the job. And when I went to my bosses and told them I'd been headhunted and I was considering leaving, they didn't want me to leave, and they offered me a 10 grand pay rise to stay, right? So I was like, wow, they just had 10 grand sitting there that they could have been paying me anyway. And now they're, okay, great. So I stayed. And then about a year later, I got headhunted again, and I went back to them, and again, they were like, we don't want you to go. So they gave me an 8 grand pay rise to stay. So I got an 18 grand pay rise in the space of 2 years, right? And so very early on, I was very lucky and very early on in my career to know that, very few companies operate in a meritocracy. Very few companies will just come to you and offer you a pay rise, right? So I think it's really, really important. When I became a manager and I started managing people, no one came and asked me for pay rises. No one came and asked me for, promotions. It was very strange for me, and I was getting people pay rises, based on the merit of their work. But one of the reasons why I wanted to become a coach, particularly with women, is that I wanted women to have a voice and to not be afraid to go and say to their bosses, like, this is the work that I've been doing, I want more money, right? Because chances are, if you're doing a good job, you'll get it, and you just have to be able to ask for it. People, again, are all too quick to be like, oh, I better not, and I don't want to rock the boat, and I'm thinking about having a baby next year, or I'm thinking about getting married. None of those things should matter. So I think, in terms of people, going up the career ladder, make sure that By the way, I've never asked for a pay rise unless I thought I deserved it. Okay, so we don't just expect to get a pay rise, we have to deserve it. So making sure that you keep account of all the work that you're doing, making sure that you are acknowledging and noting down your big wins that you're doing, so that, you know, after a 12-month period, if you think you deserve it, you can go and put a case forward and say, these are all the things that I've done, this is what I've brought to the table, you know, this is the what I've been adding to the bottom line. You know, even if it's not in a sales role, it's what you contribute to the company. And asking for a pay rise. And if the answer is no, and if you feel like you're not being valued, then think about leaving. You know, and as I say, zigzag up the career ladder, and, you know, continue to get that experience. You build your contacts early on. Pretty much every single success that I've had since I started working for myself comes from a contact that I had or that I made early on. You know, a lot of the clients that I got through my recruitment company, I placed people in Love and Dublin, the Business Post and the Independent. They're all contacts that I made from my time working in media, you know. So the old saying, be nice to the people on the way up because you'll need them on the way back down, or whatever, or if you keep going up. Yeah, that's just really, really important as well. And continue to upskill and continue to be aware. Like I say, when I was talking about the podcast, you know, I would always often encourage people, if you commute, you know, don't put the headphones in, like listen to what people are talking about, you know, be interested in the world around you, so that you can contribute to business by understanding, you know, the opportunities that are being talked about in culture, so to speak. So yeah.
So what's coming next then? What's the plans for this year?
Well, I work part-time. One of my other incomes is I work part-time with Irish Country magazine as the advertising manager, working 2 days a week with them. And I recently just launched a column with them as well, a coaching column, which is in the January-February edition. So that's going to be in every edition moving forward. I also have a dating column with Stellar magazine. One of the things that I really wanted to do this year is to you know, grow continue to grow my business, but also do a lot more by way of podcasts. So 11 days into the year, here we go. I want to do more, tell my story essentially as well, do more speaker events, do more on radio, TV. That's something that I'd be really interested in doing, you know, and sort of sharing my skills with people in the way that I do through my coaching and through my teaching, you know. But there's so many other opportunities. I'm working with self-makers this year as well, hopefully moving forward, and doing some collaborations with other businesses as well. There's a few ideas that I have in my armor that I'm just waiting to kind of pluck out. So I'm being a bit lazy this month. I think what's really interesting is when you work for yourself as well, is that you can decide how busy or how busy you want to be. And as a coach, I have to sort of practice what I preach, and make sure that I have that work-life blend, and that I'm not stretching myself too much. So I'm always making sure that I continue to ask that question, you know, what is enough and what is too much, that I'm not stretching myself and going into burnout again. So maintaining that balance, basically. Yeah.
So is where do people find you through, what's your website and LinkedIn, etc.?
Yeah, so Ariana Dunne. I'm fortunate that I have quite an unusual name. Before Ariana Grande came along, I was probably the only one that people knew about. So Ariana Dunne on LinkedIn. My website is arianadunne.com as well, and there's links on there to my Mentor HR website. There's links on there to Celtic Celebrant, which is the celebrancy name that I operate under during weddings and baby naming ceremonies. And then, yeah, from a coaching perspective, Ariana Dunne is where to find me as well. So
brilliant. Fantastic person branding going on.
Like I say, there's very few Ariana Dunnes in the world, so I've been fortunate enough to be able to get all the domain names.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had lots of competition in the ConorLyn.ch department.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a head start, but that's not too bad. Any final comments or thoughts before we finish up?
No, I mean, I've really enjoyed doing this podcast. I hope I've been sort of insightful. I just, encourage anyone out there in the same way that Blind Boy would have said to me, to if there's something that you're really passionate about and something that you really want to do, just go ahead and do it. There's a plethora of people that are willing to help and are willing to step in and help you make a success of whatever it is that you want to do. So, I don't look back. I take that leap of faith, as something that I'm really happy that I've done. And it's very easy to make money once you have skills and once you have the right people, then the opportunities will come knocking. So yeah.
Okay, Ariana, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure it'll be a fantastic success this year and in years to come. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please subscribe for future episodes and join our community on members.selfmakers.com. At Selfmakers, we believe you can be your own business and achieve self-made success. This show is shared with you to help you succeed, so please share with others to help them succeed too. Please visit selfmakers.com and follow #selfmakers on social media. Bye for now.